Hey all, this is Mr. Hammond, and in this video we are going to look at student goal tracking with Google Tools. So I've had several conversations with teachers recently with regards to student goals, both in setting the goals and then tracking and monitoring of the goals. Main request revolves around making the process quick, so it's not taking away from valuable class time, and meaningful so students and teachers can quickly track, monitor their progress, and make changes as needed. I don't think any teacher would argue against the fact that students setting goals and monitoring their progress is important. However, it's not always as straightforward of a process as it might seem, so it can easily get sent to the back burner, so to speak. So in this video, I'm going to share 3 different methods explored to assist teachers and students with the process using, again, Google Tools. So the first example we are going to look at revolves around using primarily Google Forms as the input method. So this is how students would enter their data. However, they would use Google Sheets to track their data. So let's look at that process. So I have 3 different tests that I ran. Now, the first 2 I kind of created myself after some conversations with teachers, and the third one is just something I really liked that I found that another teacher created and shared out with a group. So this first one here, the test number 1, so student goals test number 1. So it's simply just a form, very simple. They are just asked to enter data points. So for example, here you can see they are asked to enter their goal reading assessment score and then what their actual reading assessment score was. Same thing for math and spelling, and it could be whatever data points you want to track in particular. So you want something that's easy to track, like a number would work very well in this instance. So this is the editable version. So you could always edit this copy of it. So for a student, what they might see is something like this. So the directions here, whatever those might be, and then they enter their goal and their actual score in each case. How this would look on the student's end. So after they enter the data, this is going to get sent to a form. So the form initial page for the teacher is going to look something like this. So anytime a student enters data, this first page is just going to be a dump of data and numbers and email addresses and dates, which is not going to be super valuable. However, the valuable piece of this comes from all the tabs that you're going to create, one for each student. So this first student here, if I click on that, I've set up a formula so that it pulls anything that student. So if the student fills out this form, it's going to go to the data dump, and it will also be sent to this tab. So anytime they enter data, it's going to go right here. And then once the data is entered here, they will then see that in turn update the graph. So every time data is entered, that graph to the right is going to automatically be updated, so then they can quickly compare their goal score to their actual score and see how they're progressing over time. So for this process, you would have to do that for each student. So for Denny Hammond, for John Black, and so you'd have tabs across the bottom for each student. Now this would be a great view for the teacher. So this particular Google Sheet. However, for Denny Hammond, we don't want Denny to see John's information. So there's a way that you can share just that particular tab to Denny Hammond. And then you could do the same for John. You could share this particular tab with John. So before we do that, I'm going to show you how you set up this sheet so it pulls Denny's information. So the formula is in A3. So if you select that, you're going to see this fancy little formula here. And you'll notice in that formula that there is a space where there's an email address. We want to make sure that email address is the one for that particular student. So for Denny Hammond, it's denny.hammond@adinalocalschools.com. If I went to John Black, I want to make sure it's john.black@adinalocalschools.com or whatever that might be. So what I would recommend is making a copy for each student. So if you go to the little arrow next to John Black and you click on that, you can duplicate that page. You'll want to rename it. So you can either double click on it or you can hit that little arrow and rename it. Let's say it's Jackie, let's say Smalls. So then I would need to go to Jackie Smalls page, click on A3, and I just need to change that email address. And I would just do that for each student. We want to make sure that Denny only sees his tab, John only sees his tab, and Jackie only sees her tab. To do that, we are going to go to File, and we are going to go to Share, and we are going to not share with others, but we're going to actually publish to web. So we're going to click on that, and then we want to share Denny Hammond's information, and we want to share it as a web page. So there are different ways that you can share this out. However, we want to share it out in a way that anytime they update the information, it's going to update on their end with regards to the graphs and other things they're looking at to monitor their progress. If I do that with a PDF, PDFs are static. It's not going to update automatically. So we want to do that as a web page. Once you select that, it's going to give you this link. You can share it out however you want. You can share it out through Google Classroom. However, they do give you a convenient feature here that you can share it out by email. So you could click on Gmail. You would just have to enter that student's email address. You could label it, but this link here is the one that they will want to keep. They could bookmark it, but just make sure they keep that somewhere that they can easily access later on so they can keep track of their goals. So then I would send that out. And then I just want to make sure I do that for every student. So I have Denny Hammond. If I go down to, I think John has already, yep, John already has a web page. But if they do not have a web page, notice I have a publish button there. So I want Jackie to see a web page. I'm going to go ahead and publish that content. It says, are you sure you want to publish? I'm going to click OK. And then Jackie has her own unique link. So anytime you see that link, it should be different for every single student. So if I go to Denny versus John versus Jackie, they all have different links. So you just have to make sure it's published for each student. So that does take a little bit of time to set up, but once you get it set up, it should run all by itself. So as soon as students enter data into the Google form, it will automatically send to the spreadsheet. So the only time you would ever have to change anything here or add anything is if you have new students added to your class. So that is our first option. So using Google Forms. So there is a link here so you can make a copy of the form. And then there is also a link here so you can get a template of the Google Sheet. That way you have that formula already set up. In the second slide, you'll see a video that kind of walks you through that process again that I've shared, and a couple other things that you have to do to make sure that the Google form links to the Google Sheet initially. Again, all of that is just essentially a first-time setup. So the second idea with regards to assisting teachers and students in creating and tracking those goals is using just a Google Sheet. So using just a Google Sheet, it might look something like this. So again, we have a place that students can enter their data. So off to the right-hand side, we have the areas where students can enter data. So from left to right, we can see on November 1st, 2022, the student had a goal of 80, reached 85, had a goal in reading, had a goal of 70, reached 75 in math, and 22 was the goal and exceeded the goal with a 25 in spelling. And then as the students entered data there, the graphs would be updated to the left. So they can see, compare their goal to their score. Now this is color coded, so the blue shade is represented by reading, purple math, and then orange is spelling. So what the teacher might do to set this up, they would go through and enter maybe the dates. Maybe it's every Friday. We're going to update this graph, so you could go through and enter every Friday school day through this. And I added 9 different options here. So for like a 9 weeks, you could remove all of these data points. These are simply here just for an example, so you can see what the graphs would look like. But if I remove these data points, notice that would show no data here. And then as I enter data points, it's going to show up on the graph. So then what I would recommend doing, if this is something that you wanted to use, you could share this using Google Classroom. So make sure it's set up exactly the way you want it. You have the dates set up, you remove all the data points for the reading, math, and spelling, and then you can share this in Google Classroom. Make sure it makes a copy for each individual student. That way they each have their own Google Sheet that they can enter this data anytime they want. And again, they could bookmark this to their bar. That way they could see it easily somewhere on the top menu. I have tons of bookmarks, but they should be able to find it just a little bit easier. So that is our second option, using just Google Sheets. So this third option is using Google Docs. So just simply Google Docs. Now this is something that I did not create. I'll preface that up front. However, it is an awesome tool for goal tracking and monitoring. I wish I knew where I got this from. That way I could give them credit. But so this is called a daily check-in and tracker. So notice across the top, this is set up as 5 days. So each week, for example. So across the top, we have all of the standards that will be covered that week. So students could go through and click on that drop down menu and have the option from not started all the way up to completed for each of those standards. So that's lessons 1 through 5. Now, if you have more lessons than that you're covering in the week, they have the option for lessons 6 through 10. There are some links here to see progress tracker. There's a request a conference with Mrs. W. So I guess Mrs. W is probably the one that created this document, and then a link for small groups. So ways for students and teachers to see their progress. Request a conference if they're not keeping up with pace, and then signing up for a small group if they need some more individual attention. So then it's also set up into the days of the week. So Monday, I'm working on blank. I'm ahead of pace. I am on pace, or I am catching up. So those are some different options. And you could always change the options as well. You could add or edit the options that are there. Feeling good, great, not so good. So in this view, students are looking more day per day each week. So they're actually monitoring their goals each and every day. Now, it is more subjective. You don't see necessarily numbers involved in this. It's more about how they feel they are doing in a lot of cases. but I think this is a good tool to help students monitor their goals. I do like that it does encourage them to monitor them on a daily basis. From a teacher perspective, I'm not sure that this would be manageable as far as being able to track 20, 25 students and looking at every one of their documents. However, there might be a way to manage this beyond what I am thinking. I know there is this progress tracker here that if you click on that, so you can see it as like a quick view. However, I don't think that is linked to this document. It's something that the teacher would have to keep track of and update. So those are the three options, or at least ideas that I have either, I guess, created or found based on other teachers' feedback. I would love to hear from you and what you would either add to these, or maybe you have a setup that's already in place that works really well that you would be willing to share with other teachers. So hopefully that's something you found helpful. You can scan the QR code on the screen if you would like a copy of this presentation, and then links to any of the resources that I shared in this video. Thanks all.